This is Neil's on Dynasty. Please like, share, and subscribe. Be kind, helpful, and grateful. Buy yourself some silver, some platinum, and some crystallized osmium because there's nothing better to do than that. What's up, Chad? This is first off a little bit about. Well, let's see. Where am I at here? Where am I at? I am. Here's where I'm at. Okay, this right here. I typed in about the quantum purple in the Han Dynasty about 2,500 years ago. It says no, scientists did not find quantum purple pigments in the sense that ancient Chinese people understood the intentionally created pigment with quantum properties. However, modern scientists have discovered remarkable quantum critical properties in the pigment known as Han purple, which is synthesized and used in ancient China. Here's the breakdown. Han purple, this synthetic pigment created in ancient Chinese artisans more than 2,000 years ago, is a barium copper silicate, which is used to decorate various articles, including famous terracotta army and the Qin dynasty. Quantum properties. The scientists have discovered the Han purple exhibits a fascinating phenomenon when exposed to extremely low temperatures and strong magnetic fields. It transitions into a quantum critical state where it appears to lose a dimension and its magnetic properties become confined to two dimensions. Significance. This discovery is valuable in modern quantum physics research. It may help scientists understand quantum critical points and potentially lead to advancements in the field like high temperature superconductivity and quantum computing. Now, having said that, let me get back over here. Hey, what's up, Jeff? Having said that, I have something else. I want to share screen here. This right here. This is very, very interesting story.
Most unforgiving desert, something extraordinary was uncovered. Beneath layers of sand in the barren Tarim Basin, explorers discovered perfectly preserved bodies, faces with high cheekbones, light-colored hair, and distinctly European features. But this wasn't Europe. This was deep in western China, thousands of miles from where anyone expected to find them. For decades, scholars believed they were travelers, ancient migrants from distant lands. But recent DNA testing revealed something even more baffling. They weren't foreigners. They were locals, descendants of an ancient people whose origins remain shrouded in mystery. They lived over 4,000 years ago. They farmed wheat, made their own cheese, wove fine wool clothes, and, in one of the strangest details, buried their dead in wooden boats, right in the middle of the desert. These are the Tarim mummies, some of the best preserved ancient remains on Earth. But who were they really? What were they doing here, isolated in one of the most remote regions on the planet? And what secrets are still waiting to be unearthed beneath China's desert sands? The first of these mysterious bodies was discovered in the early 20th century by explorers navigating the Taklamakan Desert, part of the Tarim Basin in the Xinjiang region of western China. Over the next several decades, dozens more were found, incredibly well preserved by the dry desert air and salt-rich soil. These weren't skeletons. These were full bodies, with eyelashes, hair, and even clothing still intact. The most famous is the Beauty of Lulan, a woman who died over 3,800 years ago, yet looks as if she could open her eyes at any moment. Others include the Churchan man, buried alongside his family, wearing colorful, patterned wool clothing and tall leather boots.
Hey, what's
Clothing
up,
shockingly similar to that worn in Bronze Age Europe. The first assumption? These must be Western migrants, perhaps Indo-European traders who traveled along what would later become the Silk Road. But when scientists conducted DNA analysis in the 2010s, the results were staggering. These people weren't recent arrivals. Their genetic roots went deeper. They had been in the region for thousands of years. They weren't visitors. They were a native population, unique and isolated, with no clear connection to any known civilization.
It is,
And their way of life? Equally fascinating.
especially when
They built circular cemeteries, used cave burials, and even buried their dead in boat-shaped coffins, despite being hundreds of kilometers from any large body of water. They made cheese, some of the oldest ever discovered. They wore finely tailored wool, used horsehair string.
Hold on a second here now. Let's get back to this fine wool stuff that they made. That right there, when I first saw this article, this unmummified skeletal remain is almost 3,800 years old. And when I saw this pattern, the first thing I thought of was the Scottish kilt.
Used horsehair strings, and wove complex patterns that suggest an advanced textile culture. So who taught them all this? No written language was found with these people. No palaces, no cities, no royal tombs. Yet their craftsmanship was advanced, and their burial practices complex. Some theories link them to the Tocharian people, a lost Indo-European culture.
Scottish Irish, that's what they look like, but they're 3,800 years old, living in Western China.
That may have lived along the Silk Road long before it had a name. Others suggest they were a remnant of a forgotten Proto-European population that spread eastward during the Ice Age.
Now, that Proto-European population, there are archaeologists out there that are putting together a map of a civilization that was before the Roman Empire and all of that, and they're calling it the Dogland, and it's stretched from Eastern Europe all the way through to Scotland, and they've even found archaeological sites underneath the North Sea, probably during the Ice Age when the water level was several hundred meters below what it is now, and they've projected that it was an advanced civilization for the time. And my speculation is these people were the eastern end of the Dogland population, because the time period is about right, and they look Irish, Scottish, and that's what the Doglanders were. The Dogland population turned into what was called the Picts, or the Picts also known as Scottish. Back to the show.
Then became isolated in this desert cradle for millennia. The Tarim mummies are more than just bones. They are the living question
What's up,
mark of
Gerald?
prehistory.
Yeah, Chad, it's 3,800 years old. So are those bodies.
Here's where it gets sensitive. Many of these mummies were found in Xinjiang, a region today marked by tight control, heavy surveillance, and ethnic tension. Chinese authorities have been extremely cautious about the interpretation of these findings, especially when it comes to claims of non-Han origin in this politically fragile region.
Non-Han.
For a time,
We're
research
listening
access was
to
even
Han
restricted,
Dynasty.
and many foreign archaeologists were pushed out of ongoing studies. Why? Because the discovery of a powerful, non-Chinese ancient population living in modern Xinjiang complicates the political narrative. And history, when mixed with politics, often gets buried. Again. Despite everything we've learned, there's still more sand than answers. Hundreds of burial sites remain unexcavated. New satellite scans hint at massive ancient settlements that have yet to be explored. And as the desert wind uncovers bones and fabrics, it's clear the story isn't over. The Tarim mummies may not just be a side note in China's history. They may be the key to a lost civilization,
Look at that.
hidden in plain sight beneath one of the most desolate regions on Earth. The Tarim mummies challenge everything we thought we knew about ancient China, migration, and early
Get there.
civilization. They remind us that history isn't always written in stone. Sometimes it's wrapped in cloth, buried in
Scottish
salt,
kilt,
and waiting in the
middle of
sand
China.
to be found.
3,800 years ago. It's interesting stuff, huh? I could swear that was a kilt that I've seen in Scotland from one of the clans. And if you understand the history, actually Russia is the Eastern Vikings, part of the Viking clans from Norway and Sweden, back about 800 AD. They controlled what's now known as Russia. What's up, Hunter? And most of Russia came from the Viking Eastern kingship. So basically, Russia and Europe are kins by blood. Be quiet. Sorry about that. That cat was meowing. Hold on, I got a phone call. Hey, what's up? I was just calling, check on that job, make sure that they were going to be taking several journeymen instead of all apprentices.
Yes, several journeymen.
Right.
Many journeymen.
Excellent. Because I'm thinking of ways of how they can try and get rid of me, so I'm trying to knock them all out beforehand.
Right on.
I want to keep that job when I get it, man. So I'll work slow as hell if they need me to.
I wouldn't do that.
Well, whatever they need, I'll give it. I usually go in fast mode, but if they want me to go in slow mode, I'll work it. Anything to keep that job. In other words, I'm very malleable.
Gotcha.
All right. That's all I wanted to know. Thank you.
All right, buddy. Have a good one.
You
Bye.
too. Bye-bye. Sorry, guys. That was my business agent about the work that's coming up. Yeah, that's why I had to take that call. It was my business agent. And I'm just thinking of ways that company can get rid of journeymen and keep only apprentices, even though we're contracted 5-1. Then he said, yeah, they're taking mostly journeymen. So it's just my union's been screwing me so much recently here with their fucking rules and regulations and shit. I'm trying to find ways that they'll screw me out of this job. And he was giving me a call back confirming that they can't screw me out of the job that way. So, yay. And I'm finding more houses online in Alabama for like $80,000 or $90,000. It's like, oh my God, man, they're so cheap there. And they're going to get cheaper. Hey, are you guys interested in hearing some stuff about pre-modern Christian religion? It's Christian. It's just not well-known Christian. It seems like the Mycelian Council decided to leave a whole section of Christianity out that was the origination and start of the Christian religion that still hasn't truly been recognized as the start of the Christian religion, but they do have artifacts in scripture from the same peoples. So I've got a video about that if you guys want to watch it. And if not, I got a video that shows the smartest man on earth talking, explaining to you how you cannot deny that there is a God. Oh, sweet. That's all I needed. I just needed one person to say it. Let's see. Okay. Let me share screen. Here we go. And a little preemptive talk here. This is Ethiopia. And Ethiopia is known as the 12th tribe, or one of the 12 tribes of Israel that converted to Christianity, the earliest group of people to convert to Christianity. And that's what this is about. And you're going to hear some stuff like, about the Gospel of Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John. Well, there's also a Gospel of Thomas, and this one mentions that. But it's part of the Ethiopian Christian religion, which is actually older than the accepted Christian religion. But here goes.
That the missing years of Jesus, those silent, mysterious years between childhood and ministry, were never lost at all. What if the truth had been carefully guarded in the highlands of Africa, protected in ancient manuscripts, written in a language older than Latin, hidden not by time, but by the limits of Western tradition? This is not just history, it's sacred memory, preserved by one of the world's oldest Christian communities, untouched by colonization, and passed down through centuries of devotion. Ethiopia holds the key to a forgotten chapter of the life of Christ. Before the world knew him as the Messiah, before the baptism in the Jordan and the Sermon on the Mount, there was a child, divine, powerful, and wise beyond human understanding. And his story lives on in Ethiopia. The canonical Gospels in the New Testament present an abrupt pause in the biography of Jesus between the ages of 12 and 30. The final glimpse we get of the young Jesus is in Luke 2:41-52, where he astounds the elders in the Temple of Jerusalem with his wisdom during the Passover. But after this episode, a void of nearly 2 decades follows, a period often called the Silent Years.
And actually, they're called the silent years because if you understand about theology, this is where I say, reading the Bible, you got to go beyond the Bible to understand the Bible. The Bible we know of today was created by this group of people called the Nicene Council in like 700 AD. And they took out a lot of things to give a version of Christianity, or the man-made religion of Christianity, and what they wanted to sell to people. It's not actually everything that was written about Jesus.
Or hidden years of Jesus. There is no biblical
What's up,
account
man?
of his adolescence, early adulthood, or the path that led to his public ministry. This mysterious gap has prompted centuries of speculation and alternative writings trying to fill in the blanks. While the canonical scriptures remain silent, several apocryphal and historical texts, many excluded from mainstream Christian doctrine, attempt to piece together this enigmatic phase. Among the most intriguing sources is the Ethiopian Bible, considered by many scholars as the oldest complete biblical canon in existence. This version of the Bible, still revered by the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, provides narrative arcs, spiritual insights, and miraculous accounts of Jesus during those undocumented years. And unlike most Christian traditions that received Christianity via colonization, Ethiopia's connection to Christianity predates most Western religious institutions.
See, that's an important fact right there. Christianity in Ethiopia predates all colonized Christians' religious beliefs brought to Africa by the colonial nations. When they brought Christianity when they were colonized in Africa and brought Christianity was already in Ethiopia for 300 to 400 years.
Giving its scriptures a unique and arguably
Hey,
more
what's up,
ancient
James?
perspective. Ethiopia holds a special place in religious history, not just because of its spiritual traditions, but because of its rare status as an African nation that resisted colonization. This historical independence has allowed Ethiopia to preserve ancient manuscripts.
And for accuracy, Ethiopia was occupied and almost colonized by the Italians. I believe in the mid-1700s, they held a majority of the land for like 3 months, but when they unsuccessful in keeping it, so it was never really colonized. But the Italians did a good job. They just never completed it.
Traditions and religious relics without the interference or censorship of European imperial powers. The Ethiopian Bible, written in the ancient Ge'ez language, contains 88 books, far more than the 66 found in the widely distributed King James Version.
And that is because of the Nicene Council. And the actual word religion is a man-made thing for power and control. So for modern religion to bring power and control to religion, they had to knock out, 22 books to keep it going, basically?
These additional books include apocryphal texts, extended Old Testament writings, and detailed narratives not seen in mainstream Christian doctrine. Unlike many other Christian cultures that adopted the religion through missionary movements, Ethiopia's Christian identity has been indigenous since at least the 4th century AD, possibly earlier. This continuity and protection from colonization have preserved the Ethiopian Orthodox Church as one of the oldest and most intact Christian institutions in the world. Ethiopia's scriptural texts and oral traditions have remained remarkably stable for over 1,600 years, making them an invaluable window into how early Christians may have understood the life and teachings of Jesus, especially the so-called missing years. Often shrouded in mystique, Ethiopia is not only known for its scriptures, but also for its rumored possession of the Ark of the Covenant. While mainstream archaeology has not confirmed the existence or location of the Ark, Ethiopian tradition strongly asserts that it resides in the Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion in Aksum. This claim is rooted in the Kebra Nagast, an ancient Ethiopian text that links the nation directly to biblical Israel. According to this text, the ark was brought to Ethiopia by Menelik I, the son of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. While that tale belongs to another discussion, it underscores how intertwined Ethiopia is with biblical lore. These connections have lent credibility, at least within Ethiopian tradition, to their expanded biblical canon. When it comes to the hidden years of Jesus, the Ethiopian Bible's account is not just a spiritual interpretation, but a deeply ingrained cultural inheritance. The idea that Jesus' youth is documented in this ancient canon isn't merely religious speculation. It reflects an uninterrupted tradition that's been preserved in monasteries and oral histories for centuries. The Ethiopic Bible contains texts that Western Christianity either lost, rejected, or deemed apocryphal. These include the Book of Enoch, the Ascension of Isaiah, and other infancy Gospels that shed light on Christ's formative years. The Book of Enoch, for example, was widely read and cited in early Christian writings, including by church fathers like Tertullian, yet was removed from the Western canon by later councils.
It was removed by Western councils. That's because of the religion. Religion is about power control, not spirituality.
In Ethiopia, however, it remains an accepted part of Scripture, and it provides context not only to Christian eschatology, but also to the supernatural nature of Jesus' lineage and early life. Unlike the King James Bible, compiled under the direction of King James I in 1611 by 47 scholars with political and religious motivations, the Ethiopian canon reflects a much older, organically evolved scripture. It includes preserved oral traditions and religious texts that had circulated since the first centuries after Christ's death. This difference in preservation shows that many of the stories now considered lost or apocryphal were, in fact, seen as legitimate and sacred in Ethiopia, long before Western editors excluded them from the official Bible. Many people mistakenly believe that Christianity in Africa began with European colonization, but Ethiopia's Christian tradition is as old as the faith itself. Historical records confirm that Christianity was adopted as the state religion in Ethiopia in the 4th century, decades before it became the official religion of the Roman Empire. This claim is supported by historians like Cosmas Indicopleustes, a 6th century traveler and monk who documented Christian practices in Aksum, the ancient Ethiopian kingdom. His records describe an already thriving Christian community, complete with churches, theological debates, and refugee protections for persecuted Christians from other lands. These facts position Ethiopia not...
I wonder why in history, our history in schools, they don't teach us about this. They specifically cut this part out of history. I learned a lot about Rome and how Christianity started in Rome, but I never learned this in school.
Not just as a receiver of Christianity, but as an early cradle of it. Ethiopian Christians were not newcomers to the faith. They were founders and preservers of early Christian doctrine and mysticism. The preservation of texts that describe Jesus' youth as filled with divine power, healing, and wisdom reflects this deep-rooted theological tradition. It also underscores that the Western Christian understanding of Jesus' life is incomplete without acknowledging these alternative ancient sources. In 2010, scholars discovered an illustrated gospel written in Ge'ez, an ancient South Semitic language still used in Ethiopian liturgy. This manuscript was found in a remote monastery, perched high on a mountain, untouched by modern civilization. This discovery added further credibility to the idea that Ethiopia preserved an authentic early Christian tradition. The Gospel includes vibrant, symbolic artwork and passages absent from Western Bibles, offering insight into...
Now I have something to say here. You see this picture, that it's a recreation of what they found. When you understand the King James version of the Bible was 1600s by an English king, they're doing it, again, religion, a representation of the world that it's going to represent. And that's why they did the artwork with white people. And as you see here, they did the artwork with more of a traditional African, North African artwork, showing that it's religion's is a complicated thing, and it's very powerful, and it's there to control us.
To early interpretations
Christianity is not, religion is.
of Jesus' life, including his childhood. Unlike the minimalist narratives of the Synoptic Gospels, these Ge'ez texts depict a Jesus deeply engaged with...
See, now that picture right there in the crowd in the background, that looks more like a Middle Eastern, North African setting 2,000 years ago, and a more accurate picture. But you couldn't sell that religion to the Europeans, so you had to change the pictures to make it more accepting to the Europeans to accept that religion based off of Christianity.
With his divine mission from a young age. They show a messianic consciousness that Western tradition typically delays until his baptism. These illustrations also help scholars understand how Ethiopian Christians perceived Christ, not just as a teacher and savior, but as an eternal being whose divine authority was evident from birth. Among the most fascinating texts preserved in Ethiopia are the Infancy Gospels, which describe miraculous events during Jesus' childhood. One well-known story involves Jesus forming birds from clay and then bringing them to life, a symbolic display of divine creativity. While this story appears in other apocryphal sources, like the Infancy Gospel...
Now, if you see that picture there, the picture on the left is supposed to be Jesus Christ. The one on the right are, I guess, some of his apostles or whatnot. And they actually show Jesus as more of a North African look, and the Ethiopian look is more of the picture to the right, a more truer version rather than the version of the Bible that we get today, as far as artwork.
Of Thomas, its survival and reverence within Ethiopian Christianity suggest it was taken seriously as a true account of Christ's divine nature from a young age. These stories, though omitted from most Western Bibles, were not treated as myth in Ethiopia. They were part of the oral and written scripture of a devout community that believed Jesus' powers did not emerge suddenly at age 30, but were visible throughout his early life. From healing injured workers like Joseph the carpenter to raising the dead, these accounts enrich the spiritual portrait of Jesus and provide a deeper understanding of how his earthly ministry may have developed in private before it went public. Some of the most dramatic accounts in the Ethiopian tradition involve Jesus exercising control over life and death. One story tells of a child who provoked Jesus and was struck down, only to be later restored to life through...
Yeah, I heard that story a long time ago, that Jesus killed someone and then brought him back to life, but it wasn't in the Bible. And this is where I found out from where I heard that story. It was from a theologian when I was really young and not really into it, and told the story.
Jesus' mercy. These episodes reveal not just a divine child, but a complex, powerful figure navigating his human emotions with supernatural. These stories, while not included in mainstream Bibles, offer a rich tapestry of early Christian imagination and belief about Jesus' nature. They highlight the wonder, mystery, and divine power attributed to him even as a child, which is notably absent from the more historical-focused Synoptic Gospels. Through these narratives, Ethiopian Christianity preserves a holistic view of Jesus, both fully human and fully divine, from birth to resurrection. While the Western Church focused heavily on Jesus' public ministry, his baptism, miracles, parables, death, and resurrection, the Ethiopian tradition invites us to consider the sacredness of his entire life journey, including the years the Bible leaves silent. This broader narrative enriches our understanding of Jesus, connecting spiritual teachings with lived experience and cultural context.
Anyhow, that was about the end of it anyhow. Yeah, I just wanted to bring that stuff to y'all because it's new, interesting, different, and it's historically the books they have are they're not forgeries. It's just omitted books from the Nicene Council. And one of them he mentioned shortly was the Gospel of Thomas. And the reason why I believe the Gospel of Thomas was left out of the Nicene version or the King James version is because it's mostly almost direct quotes of Jesus and what he said. And one of them, he said, I read, it directly disputes the need for religion and religious establishments, which have totally blown the economics of religion at the time. So I could see why they wanted to cut that out. And that's very apparent if you know anything about like the Templars and Friday the 13th and that whole story, where the Roman Catholic Church and the French king decided they owed too much money to the Templars, so they'd kill them off, keep the money. See, that's not religion, that's not Christianity, that's religion and power and control over money and of that religion. And I believe that's why the Nicene Council left out the Gospel of Thomas, because it directly subverts that thought process. It does say that you need to go to church for the communal need of it, but you don't need to have a religion. And that's part of what the Gospel of Thomas was saying. But now communion with others doesn't have to be, any place can be anointed as a church. All you need is more than two or more people, and you can just state, we anoint this in the name of God, and we're going to talk about you. And for that time period, God is with you, and you are in a church. But that doesn't bring money into, the Vatican or any other major power source that has lots of money, power, and control that says they are spiritual. And that's the difference that people have in their own brain of separating religion from spirituality. And that's another reason why I wanted to bring that little show to you guys. And that's why I said, do you want to talk a little bit about religion? It gives you a little more insight to my thoughts and views on religion as to spirituality. And they're actually two words because they mean two different things. And we've been waylaid with the word religion our whole life and not the word spirituality. Well, they were, JM. They were documented. And then they were taken out because it again, the story where he killed that kid and then felt bad and brought him back, that this dude said it perfectly. It shows the emotional human side of a divine being on earth and having to deal with his emotional side, which was new to him. And he got evil too. Because if you think about God, God is everything. He is the light and the dark, the Alpha and the Omega, good and evil. He is not separate from evil. He is evil too. He is everything. Ooh, I got another one I could show you that's even more on a scientific thought processes way of looking at things, in case you have issues with the spiritual way of looking at things. Let's see if I can't find this real quick. Here we go. Oh, this is beautiful. Okay, hold on a second here. I got to get this. All right, here we go. Let me share screen. Give me a second, guys. This will be very, very interesting. Very interesting indeed. Let me get over here and take myself out. Well, I guess I don't need to.
God is real, angels are real, demons are real. Is the devil real?
Oh, yes.
You like I said that?
Let me tell you something very important about the man you just saw, Chris Langan. Renowned for his extraordinary intellect, with an IQ estimated to be between 195 and 210, he developed the CTMU, a revolutionary theory about reality. Let me briefly explain what it means. The CTMU, or Cognitive Theoretic Model of the Universe, suggests that everything in reality, from consciousness to physics to God, is interconnected within a system that operates like a self-aware computer, processing and displaying information. Now, let's hear Chris Langan explain this in his own words.
If we're talking about a theory of everything, the first question we have to establish, does God exist? Yes. Simple as
Yes, the reality has an identity, okay? The identity is that as which something exists. Matter of fact, when you say the word reality, you're naming an identity. It is, you're identifying something. That's what the CTMU says. It just comes up with the mathematical structure that you need to build a reality out of that, you see? So you come up with that identity and then you search it for its properties. You see, once you've built the preliminary framework, then you start deducing the properties of this identity, and you find out that those properties match those of God as described in most of the world's major religions. You can deny the existence of God, or are its properties such that God definitely has to exist? And the answer is God exists. Properties of the central substance and central principle of reality, those properties are attributed to God, including, of course, things like you have the three O's: omniscience, omnipotence, and omnipresence, but then you've also got consciousness. God has to be sentient.
We're not just defining God out of existence. Sometimes you'll hear people say God exists, but they'll give God such a weak and shallow definition that the God that they're describing has no relation to the God that we conceive of. You're saying, no, God himself is conscious and therefore personal?
Yes. You can establish a personal relationship with God.
Personal.
We're images of God.
I've said that on
an
many
image is
debates.
basically the product of a mapping. God maps himself into each human being.
Is your claim a pantheistic claim that God is the universe or the universe is God and that's that? Or no? Or is God outside of the universe and created?
God is greater than, well, what is the universe?
Reality has an identity that can be studied like anything else that exists. When we examine it, we find three main features: complete knowledge, ultimate power, and presence everywhere. These exactly match what religions say about God. This isn't just a theory. God is conscious and aware, creating direct connections with humans by putting part of himself into each person. This means we can have real relationships with God, not just believe in him as an idea. The mathematical structure behind this shows that God must exist because reality needs him to work properly. He's not just the concept we created, but the central force that makes everything possible and keeps it working. This leads to a crucial question about how God relates to our universe. Is God the same thing as the universe? Or is God something bigger that includes but isn't limited to the universe? To answer this, we need to look at modern theories about how our universe works, particularly the simulation hypothesis.
You ever hear of the simulation hypothesis?
Yes.
Okay, well, the simulation hypothesis is basically the idea that the reality we see around us, physical reality, is simulated on some sort of an automaton or a computer. God, it's more panentheistic. The idea is that you've got the physical universe that you see around you, but God is not confined to the physical universe.
Okay.
See, there's an ordinary
JP Morgan Chase invests in healthcare to help create healthier communities.
Make the green grass grow.
pantheist assumes that God is somehow confined to the universe, that there is just what we see around us and God is in every piece of it. God is distributed over it.
Yeah.
But it's a little bit more complex than that, because this part of the universe that we see around us cannot exist just by itself.
Yeah.
Okay? There are certain things that it entails. And when you go into those entailments, that's how you get to God. That's how you get to the identity of reality. But to get back to the simulation hypothesis, that we're living in the display of that simulation. In addition to the display, there is also a processing aspect. And God, it captures both of those things. He captures both the display and the processor.
What do you mean? I hate to put it in.
Well, I mean, okay, here's the display. You realize the display contains states.
Yep.
Okay, you see things, the objects contain states. States are static.
Yep.
That's why they're called states.
Yeah.
Okay, static. How do they change? Well, they have to be processed. Something has to process.
Yeah.
And in the calculus, for example, those are tiny little infinitesimal intervals. Okay, but they are not actually contained in the states themselves. They have a neighborhood, a little tangent space or what have you, where you can sort of draw little vectors that suggest that some kind of processing is going on. But the idea of being a state and being a process, those are two different things to the ordinary way of looking at it. It turns out that you can't properly describe reality and causation at all unless you put those things together somehow. And that's what it takes God to do. God provides the processing functionality for your state.
The universe works in a way similar to a complex computer system, with two main parts: what we can see and experience, the display, and what makes everything work behind the scenes, the processor. This idea comes from the simulation hypothesis, which suggests our reality might be like a sophisticated simulation, but God isn't just part of this system. He's bigger than it and controls both aspects. What makes this understanding unique is that everything we see exists in different states, like frozen moments in time. These states need something to make them change and move forward, and that's where God's role becomes crucial. He provides the processing power that makes everything work together, not just maintaining the universe but actively participating in its operation. This understanding of how reality works leads us to a deeper question about consciousness. How do we, as conscious beings, fit into this complex system of display and processing? The answer involves something called quantum mechanics and identity operators.
Now, how do I make sense of consciousness?
Well, ordinarily, quantum mechanics, you know what quantization is?
You know, I know the word.
Yeah. Well, you decide what the ultimate irreducible objects are. It turns out that in order to quantize that theory that I was talking about, that theory of identity, where you've got the display and you've got the processor, and it's handling both, it turns out that in order to handle both of those things, you need a certain kind of quantum. That quantum is called an identity operator. God is the identity. So obviously these little quanta, they have to be, they're doing things, they're processing, so we can call them operators, right? They are identity operators. Okay, the identity operator has, basically it takes input from the outside world, recognizes it or accepts it using syntax, processes it, and then returns it to the world as external state.
That's what I'm asking. Are you telling me that this table is conscious?
In that sense, yes. Generically conscious. It's relying on our consciousness to do it. There's levels of quanta. These are tertiary quanta. They're all put together using physical localistic forces, right? But those are
So basically what he's saying is perception is reality.
determinative. They don't fully determine what happens. Why? The Heisenberg uncertainty principle, for example, it tells you that the quantum rules, they're probabilistic.
Consciousness works through a system of identity operators, special elements that take information from the world, process it, and return it back. This isn't just about human consciousness. Everything has some level of awareness, even simple objects like tables. The difference is in the levels. Humans have a more complex form of consciousness, while objects have a simpler version. What makes this understanding revolutionary is how it connects to quantum mechanics, where things aren't completely determined but work on probability. This means consciousness isn't just observing reality, it's actively participating in it. The way we process and interact with reality affects how it manifests. This understanding of consciousness naturally raises questions about free will. If everything has some level of consciousness and nothing is fully determined, what does this mean for our ability to make choices?
Now, you've mentioned two things that raise a new question for me, which is you mentioned this idea of simulation, just the simulation or self-simulation, and you've mentioned us doing things. So then it would seem to me we have to tackle the question, do we really do much of anything at all, in the sense, do we have free will?
What's up, Tom?
Yes, we do.
Oh, I'm glad to hear it. I always thought we did.
Well, yes, we have to have free will. Oh, I was discussing with you earlier the idea of a fixed array. Okay?
Yeah.
All right, now, modern physics know basically what you've got is you've got a bunch of quantum fields in superposition, and then those fields consist of little fluctuations, little quantum fluctuations, right? Reality is actually generative. Okay, it's not a fixed manifold. Everything is being created all the time. Not just our states. Our states are being recreated, right? When I look at you, I'm seeing Michael Knowles, okay? I'm seeing you sitting there. But that means that I'm seeing your boundary. I'm seeing what distinguishes you from the external environment, right?
Right. Well, it's sort of like a little baby, right? Has trouble recognizing the limits of things and recognizing what some individual object might be from, the glass on the table. They have trouble distinguishing those.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Okay, the baby has to learn to distinguish those boundaries. And it has to receive the right visual cues at the right age so that it can actually learn how to do that.
Yeah.
The concept of free will is explained
What he just said there is you can program children.
through modern physics and quantum mechanics. Unlike a fixed, predetermined universe, our reality is constantly being created and recreated. When we observe something like looking at another person, we're not just passively seeing them, but actively participating in creating reality by recognizing boundaries and distinctions. What makes this understanding powerful is how it connects to quantum fields and fluctuation.
If any of you guys know anything about Timothy O'Leary, put his thought processes on top of this.
Reality isn't like a movie playing out in a predetermined way. It's more like a continuous process of creation where we actively participate. This explains why babies must learn to distinguish objects and boundaries. They're learning to participate in this creative process of reality. This view of reality as an active, creative process where we have genuine free will leads us to question what happens when we die.
So, speaking of this non-terminal domain, in a really basic question, I'm not going to ask you if I'm going to go to heaven or hell, but will I go to either heaven or hell?
You will persist after you die, okay? Where you go depends on who Michael Knowles really is.
But you're telling me I'm going somewhere.
Yes.
You're confident of that. I don't just evaporate. I don't just turn into oblivion.
Well, you can. If you displease God, that's exactly what's going to happen to you. God is going to cut you off, and he's going to say, I can't see him anymore.
Okay, we're going to end it right there, because in Revelations, it basically says, and I was raised Southern Baptist, to where we thought hell was fire and brimstone, and you're going to burn. And that's not at all what it is. What it is it's the absence of life. And what that gentleman, the smartest man on earth, just said was, if God wants you to not exist, you will not exist. And what I think of everyone who is not saved is they will be written out of the book of life, and therefore they will not exist. And in the Bible, it even states somewhere that when you are saved, you will be in Jerusalem, the new kingdom of God, and your unsaved relatives could be walking around and they see you, but you won't recognize or even remember their existence. And that is the determination of hell, because they are not recognized by God, and therefore it will not be recognized by you, and that will separate heaven from hell. But that's just the way I see it. I've done a lot of theological studies, and I have a weird perception. So if anyone else has a perception, sling it out there. And if anyone wants to come up on stage, pinned as usual. But I just wanted to bring those cool little things to light. Actually, all of them were about religion, different parts of religion, but all of it on religion from different aspects, from scientific, intellectual, historic. Actually, that was a pretty good college lesson we just got. Sorry, I'm getting my tea ready. I'm talking a little bit louder because I'm in the back of the room. Get the tea bag set up. So, any thoughts from anybody that you'd like to talk about? Usually when people start talking about religion, they can't stop. Now here I am talking about it, and no one wants to talk about it. Probably because I brought visual documentation of different aspects of religion and spirituality. From different aspects, I mean scientific and religious and philosophical. But anyhow, I'm going to go ahead and end this. It's been about 50 minutes. I got out what I wanted to get out. I appreciate all of you giving me your time. And, let's check this out. No, don't want to. And I hope you guys have a great week. It's going to be a great week. If you perceive it to be a great week, and if you're positive, according to what this smartest man in the world just said, it's your perception of the way things are is how they will be. So perceive it to be a good week. I'm perceiving all of y'all having a great week, and I hope you do. Till next time, bye-bye.